This is an insane Karen story. Let me know how you would handle this. Won a lawsuit against a guy who tried to force me out of business because I broke his local monopoly by RomanWeeb49. I'm 26 years old and decided to open my own business this year. Moving forward in this post, I should point out that I'm from a small town, 1,000 people, in the rural Midwest. Because of this, everyone has some sort of connection with someone. We went to one of the liquor stores in the closest city 30-ish minutes away to a small city of 8,000 people. When we were grabbing some of the alcohol for a party, I was looking at the prices and just saw how insane those prices were. For a 6-pack of local beer, they are charging $15. I was thinking about this, and I figured that I could probably make bank opening a liquor store. Back in February, I was just furious about my crappy job and thinking out loud how cool it would be to own my own business to a friend. My friend's mom happened to be the president of the local bank. He told me, hey, with the pandemic, the bank has been struggling to find customers to give out loans. Right now, the bank is giving out loans for cheap. A couple of weeks later, I went in and I met with my friend's mom. I pitched my idea with the research that I'd done on alcohol prices, potential demand, and estimated income. I got the loan at a fantastic interest rate. I bought a building, which happened to be the former bank, and I hired my dad to help me renovate the building. My dad is a general contractor, and he gave me an excellent quote on materials and labor. After working everything out with the distributors, getting the proper licenses, and getting my paperwork that I needed for the government, I was ready to open my liquor store in May. I had started taking out ads in the local newspaper advertising my store and my prices. When I was in talks with my distributors, I learned, even with inflation and everything else, the liquor stores in the city had like an 80% markup. I talked to a local business owner, and he suggested that I have around a 35 to 40% markup. Because of this, I was significantly cheaper than the closest liquor store and had a much wider selection than the gas stations and small local stores nearby. My hometown is near a national forest. As such, we have a ton of people who come up for weekends for recreational activities year-round. My first week, the week before Memorial Weekend, after opening, I had made a $4,000 profit. It was great being my own boss. If someone was rude to me or my girlfriend, oh, I'm sorry, you can do your business elsewhere. If someone tells my girlfriend a slur, they can go pay me 15% more at the register. Did the gang and I run out of alcohol? Time to grab my keys, not car keys, the store keys. My apartment's like 2 blocks away, and go to the store. That's not to say that it wasn't difficult running my own business, especially that my only employee was my girlfriend, and we were both working 6 or 7 10 to 12-hour days a week. I was both manager, accountant, and cashier, but screw it, it's so much nicer knowing that I can tell someone to pound sand for being a prick. A couple of weeks after Memorial Day, some old guy walks into my store a couple of minutes after I opened. He seemed friendly enough, but eventually offered to buy my store. I'm not going to say the amount, but it would not have even covered my principal on the loan. I rejected that proposal outright and refused to negotiate the sum higher. He walked out of my store saying, "Well, you'll be sorry you rejected that offer." The next month, a guy walked into my store and asked if I was the owner. After saying yes, I was informed that my business was being sued by this random guy that I'd never heard of for libel. After he left, I was freaking out, and I decided that I was going to close early. When I got home, I Googled the guy, and I soon saw a picture of that guy that tried to buy my store. Turns out that that's the guy who owns both of the liquor stores in the nearby city. It also just so happens that he is on city council. With a little bit of further digging, I learned that this city has an ordinance that reads, "Any business institution that does not fulfill the definition of a restaurant, tavern, or liquor dispensary will be excluded from obtaining a license for the sale of alcohol." Later, I discovered that that same guy happens to be the head of the board which approves liquor licenses. I love small town corruption. Either way, I had a major issue. My maternal uncle happens to be a lawyer in a neighboring state. I decided to call him and try to get some legal advice. I talked to him and I read the documents that I had been handed and served over the phone and the research that I had done. After receiving all of the information that I had read off, I was expecting to get some sort of advice, but instead I heard, "Hang on, I gotta make a call." And he hung up. I'm freaking out. I was actually about to post my first post of legal advice, but I'll just be honest, I just wanted someone to tell me it was going to be okay, and I didn't need to crawl to this guy on my hands and knees. As I was writing the title, my uncle called back. "Hey, OP, I just got off the phone with my partner. He agreed that we can take your case pro bono. If you would like to accept, we can discuss at my office tomorrow at 1 o'clock. This is how I learned that my uncle is on the bar in 3 states. So we meet and we discuss the case. Turns out that the guy filed the libel suit against my business based on the ads that I took out in the local newspapers. He claimed that my ads were targeted to damage his and his business's reputation. There were a few other things that I had no idea what was being referenced, but Uncle assured me that we would win this case no problem. 3 weeks later, the case is dismissed, but after my uncle says, people like that piece of work will likely try to file another suit against you. If that happens, call me, and I promise that I will help. The next day, I get served again, but this time, I am the defendant. Not my store, me. I swear that I look at the documentation and the only thing that changed was, instead of my business's name, mine is listed as the defendant. Same thing happens. 4 weeks later, the case is dismissed. Over the next 3 months, I was sued just as many times. Before the 5th case's hearing, we had a settlement meeting. My uncle, the judge, the guy suing me, his lawyer, a bailiff, and I were sitting in this room. Judge says, "You two have been in court 4 times already. Is there any way we could come to an agreement that'll stop this cycle of faulty litigation?" The guy's lawyer says that they have an offer and hand it to my uncle, who then hands it to me. It essentially read that he'll stop all litigation if I sell my business for about 30% of the remaining loan principal. I outright rejected the offer and I made a counteroffer. I said, "If you drop this case, I won't sue your butt for harassment." He bust out laughing. "Sue me? With what money? The legal fees alone ought to have drained you. You should be happy I chose to extend this offer and not sue your butt into bankruptcy and buy that crap hole from the bank when they foreclose on yourself." The judge, the bailiff, and the guy's own lawyer were looking at him aghast for saying the silent part out loud about the real reason I was getting sued. My uncle straight out said to him, "Oh, I'm sorry. Apparently you were never told. I have taken all of my nephew's cases pro bono. The only money he has spent on your litigations is gas. And bluntly, sir, I think your outburst has just ensured a suit against you." After that, we just left, and I was then informed a few days later the litigation was dropped. Right now, my uncle and I are talking about the future suit against the guy. I want to sue the guy for a very high amount to try and get press attention on this guy and his sketchy actions. Although my uncle warned me that we'll need to be careful because if we set the damages too high, it'll look like we're just being vindictive. This suit won't be pro bono, but after getting sued 5 times for free essentially, I'm not going to complain. Looking back on this, I am so thankful that my friends and family supported me the entire way, especially my uncle. Without my uncle, I would have absolutely lost my business. Now, my uncle came into the store today and informed me unofficially that if I choose to continue with the lawsuit, his firm will take the case on a 25% contingency. If you were OP, how hard would you hit this other company? Let me know. Here's a continuation of that last story. Remember that slur? He actually wrote a story called "Customer Said to My Girlfriend, Go Back to China, Slur. She's Not Chinese." I opened a liquor store in my hometown this year, which my girlfriend and I are running together. Last night, I posted to the subreddit about something else that had happened. How I was able to legally charge this lady 15% extra, and my girlfriend said that I should tell the story. 4th of July weekend, and we were prepped for the busy weekend. Although around 8 o'clock, things had started to slow down. In the store, we have a TV which I use to run ads for different events, benefits, and a few other things for my store and a couple other businesses in town. When we have no customers in the store, my girlfriend and my employees are allowed to do the same, and I connect our TV to our phones and we'll stream Hulu or YouTube videos. So, we're standing there watching Family Guy when the door opens. I walk up to the register while my girlfriend is turning the TV back to the ads that we have running. This lady, Karen, who easily looks like she's in her late 40s, maybe early 50s, walks in, looking absolutely furious. Before I can say hi, she yells, "Does your manager know what you're doing?" My girlfriend and I share a glance. Because of our age, many assume we would just work there and aren't the owner and general manager. I look back and I nod my head. Yeah, I'm pretty certain that the manager and the owner have intimate knowledge of what we're doing. My girlfriend chuckles behind me. She huffs. "I don't care who you're sleeping with. I need this beer. Do you have it?" My girlfriend jumps up. "Yeah, I just stocked it. I'll..." The lady just snaps her attention directly to her. "What are you doing here?" My girlfriend is very confused by that comment. "I'm working." The lady says, "No, that's not what I meant, and you know that. My father fought in Korea, so why is someone like you here? This is an American company with American jobs. You should not be here." My girlfriend and I are absolutely slack-jawed at this woman for her blatant racism. Before we can say anything, she continues, "Your kind murdered Americans, so maybe you should go work for the Chinese or go back to China, you slur." Before this woman or my girlfriend can say anything, I yell, "Get the heck out of my store." The woman snaps at me, rounding the counter. She screeches back at me, "Who do you think you are?" "I'm the owner." I grab her arm as she starts whining and slapping my hand, but I just start dragging her to the door. "Now get out." I open the door to my vestibule and push her out into it. She turns back. She's standing in the vestibule and yells, "I'm calling the police for impersonation and assault." I didn't even dignify it with a response and just walked back in. I hadn't noticed, but my girlfriend had gone back into the office and I started consoling her. I've dealt with rude people all my life, but that woman crossed a line. Around 10 minutes later, I see a car pull into the parking lot on the monitor connected to the cameras. I look at it and see one of the trucks that's used by the sheriff's department. I wait a couple of minutes and I get up and walk out front and see this woman standing next to my door. She's giving a statement to the deputy, who I instantly recognize. I went to high school with this guy and we played football and baseball together. I walk out the door and am greeted by, "That's him. He's impersonating the owner and assaulted me." The deputy looks over at me, very obviously confused. "Him?" The lady rolls her eyes. "Yes, him." The deputy says, "Miss, he's the owner." She about goes ballistic on him. "No, he's not. Look at him. He's too young." The deputy is very obviously annoyed, but manages to explain to her that I am actually the owner. She then says, "But he assaulted me." I explain the situation to him, and he turns to her and says, "Miss, he is the owner and he asked you to leave, then he removed you from his business." The woman is standing there fuming when she finally yells, "Fine, I'll just get my husband's beer." I stand in front of the door and then I say, "No, you're not." "Excuse me? You call my girlfriend a slur. I'm not letting you back into my store." She huffs and yells, "Fine, I'm going somewhere else to get his beer." She leaves, and before the deputy got to his car, I stopped him and convinced him to stay for a while. I knew that lady was going to be coming back because nobody in my town carries that beer. 20 minutes later, the lady comes back, this time much humbler. "I'm sorry, but no one else in this town sells my husband's beer. We're having a barbecue tomorrow, and it would mean the world to him if I could get that beer." I sigh and say, "Well, I suppose it'll be all right." She is overcome by this look of gratitude. "But I will be charging you a 15% markup, and you will give my girlfriend an apology tomorrow." She stops. "Why?" I remind her what she said to my girlfriend. "Well, that markup, it's illegal." This is why I asked the deputy to hang around. "Actually, miss, as long as he lets you know about the markup, he's perfectly in line with state and county law." She bought her husband 2 6-packs of the beer and is then escorted outside by the deputy. The next day, she came in and handed my girlfriend a handwritten note to her. My girlfriend then calmly explained that she and her family are not Chinese, they're Hmong, which if you know anything about Hmong history, you'll understand the irony of the lady's "your kind murdered Americans." How would have you handled this, Karen? Be nasty to English as a second language folks who inadvertently use violent language? Now you're stuck with Memo Cannon, Report Crusher, and Document Hunter, posted by the Black Company Wiki. I was a freelancer for a media company that maintains a database for their videos, photo galleries, other digital property, as well as a separate bit for contracts and the like. One of the clients who struck a deal with them to utilize their IP was represented by a woman with serious bullying issues. Let's call her Boomer. She was a Luddite and rarely seemed to understand anything that was being said on the conference calls. So, I suppose to feel important, she acted like the grammar police and would interrupt her own boss's business partners and stakeholders in mid-speech if they said something slightly differently than how she wanted to hear it. Sometimes she did this multiple times in a single call. The worst was when she abruptly corrected English as a second language folks, like the group from India or the project manager from Germany or the account rep from Hong Kong. Really, any stakeholders from any non-Anglophone country who were still learning English. But on top of the grammar policing, she had a special fixation on correcting violent words and phrases. Now I'll give you some examples to follow. Now this is something that I would support to a degree, as I do try to avoid that language myself when I have the presence of mind to do so. Now there have been some fair-minded movements for years now, all basically calling for a reduction in this type of language. But Boomer never conducted herself in a way that was respectful of anyone about this. So for me, it's not about the nobility of someone's cause, it's about how you treat people. When someone casually said, "Shoot me a note," very common to hear, Boomer would interject, "Wait, why did you just say that?" You could hear a pin drop. The proverbial tumbleweed would roll through. It's hard to convey the total rudeness in a Reddit post, but this is tangible stuff. She would then pontificate briefly on why such phrases were unacceptable, and it's a shame we've not moved beyond this language. And then suddenly, it was crickets again, like we're supposed to go back to the topic at hand. Like she didn't just treat someone like scum for saying a very common phrase. It's such a disruption, and she never apologized a single time. The first few times this happened, people were stunned. People from all countries of origin and all age groups, the other boomers, the Gen Xers, the millennials, and the younger folks. This also extended to hunting-related words, the phrase "shooting fish in a barrel," and harmless phrases like "deer in the headlights." When anyone said this stuff, she acted like she was being given carte blanche to be an entitled bully with anger issues for 45 seconds. Even the group I worked for, who got regular royalty checks from her boss, hated this. When she wasn't pulling these stunts, she was silent except for terse, distracted, soulless replies, and only when absolutely necessary. So to understate it politely, she earned only negative feelings from everyone. This came to a head. It turned out that the company was helping with a lot of her syndication and sub-licensing docs and even cloud management free of charge. Now they did not have to do so, and it was not in the contract. This had been unofficially grandfathered for her by one of the senior sponsors, and only because Boomer was a Luddite. The operations guy who did some of this grunt work for her finally got insulted by one of Boomer's direct callouts. He said something like, "We need a dev who can hunt down the root cause." And she snapped as usual. So he categorically refused to do the work, meaning she would need to pay extra or get database access and do it herself like all the other clients. I saw a fun opportunity here and seized it. I volunteered to handle it for her myself until I could set her up with the necessary access, at which point she ultimately would use the same screens I use. She readily agreed, and this is where I think malicious compliance comes in. We made a customized interface for me to use and then gave her access to it. They were technically the same screens I use. There was a Brazilian IT guy who hated her more than anyone, and a girl in the creative department who commiserated with our cause. I sold them on my little plan, and one evening we made it happen. There was a duplicate web GUI, or GUI, graphic user interface, that had been created for testing or something, but was now disused. We decided to grant her access to this GUI, not the production or standard one, but with key verbiage and icons of violent language that we knew she'd hate, perforating the entire thing. The quick access bar that follows when she scrolls had these 6 beauties. Report Crusher. This was the reporting system she would be using 24 times per week. The icon was a vise with the paper getting smashed inside of it. If you look closely enough, the paper had the tiniest frown. Document Hunter, instead of just search. The icon was a bullseye getting hit with an arrow. Shoot us a note, instead of just contact us. The icon was a speeding bullet with an innocuous, chubby-cheeked smile and a baby-like expression. Memo Cannon. This was my favorite little contribution to the whole thing. It was always just a broken link. It never did anything except take you to a unique 404 message page with a teensy little line art drawing of a deer with antlers, his tongue sticking out, slack-jawed, and X's over his eyes. I just thought Memo Cannon was the funniest phrase I had come up with, and we knew it would stare at her in the middle of her screen for the next few years. The icon was a squat little cannon with a sparking fuse. Troubleshooting, instead of just help, but the 2 OOs in troubleshooting were crosshairs. Wiki Change Patrol. This was worthless since it just linked to a recent changes page for a wiki full of deprecated docs that nobody consulted. But the icon was a gendarme looking guy with a smacking huge baton into his palm. It also featured these gems. The cancel button for the reporting system said kill task instead of just cancel. We had a file deduping routine. We changed the text for that button to say, got time to kill? She didn't have any permissions to access this actual function, but she would be seeing this button each time she opened any document in the web viewer. There were a handful of spots where the IT guy put a splash of camouflage coloration. In the standard environment, these were all just dead spaces. He thought, I believe correctly, that camouflage would get her blood to boil. Before we granted her access to this wonderful Frankenstein, I permanently switched to the same environment and GUI so that I could say honestly, yes, these are the same screens that I use, which is what she agreed to. I hashed together a walkthrough in PDF that even a zombie could learn from, using screen captures from the new interface, passed it along, and that was that. The fallout is a bit anticlimactic because I never got any calls from Boomer directly with feedback that I could save her myself. This is because she lured some gullible student to do the grunt work for her in an unpaid gig. So where I thought I'd be cherishing the apoplectic response firsthand, I actually wound up liaising with the disinterested teenager. But eventually, it did filter back to me secondhand that when Boomer finally saw the screen, she was livid. She called the account manager and demanded changes. The account manager and anyone else we knew was liable to get a call from her had been prepped beforehand for this eventuality and had access to screen captures, which backed up the idea that what she was seeing was the normal interface. Absolutely no changes whatsoever were made. You cannot access this website posted by Zanies for All. Once upon a time, there were no iPhones, no Wi-Fi, social media was MySpace, and YouTube was pretty much just a shell of its current self. The internet had just hatched from its egg and needed time to grow into what it is today. But as a kid in the early 2000s, that wasn't helpful when you wanted to play games now and in school, because your parents wouldn't let you play them on a weekday, and you didn't have a Game Boy. So there I was, bored to death in the 5th grade because I didn't like school much, and that meant on Monday I'd have to wait 5 days to eventually get back to playing Star Wars Battlefront, the better version, not the new trash, or Burnout 3. As there was in most elementary schools, we had a computer lab. It was big enough to host one classroom of 40 students and then some, and we had state-of-the-art Dell computers with Windows XP. For the most part, we were limited to a few educational PC games, Microsoft Office, and the internet, which was limited by the firewall to just the educational sites and Disney's Flash games. They did have the Oregon Trail, but I was too stupid at the time to play it more than 10% of the way through without losing my money or everyone dying. The computer lab was accessible before school between 7 and 8:30 a.m., during 2 breaks, breakfast for 20 minutes, lunch for 40 minutes, and after school. The only problem was there was nothing exciting to play. I'd try every games website that I knew, but the result was always the same. Miniclip, you cannot access this website. Free online games, you cannot access this website. Newgrounds, you can't access this website either. Okay, fine. Nickelodeon, you can't access this website. I guess they don't like SpongeBob. One day, my older brother, the computer whiz, finds out about how to download Flash games from around the internet onto his local hard drive, which is as simple as taking the cookies from where they're stored onto your computer into an easily accessible location. Now, we start building a repository of all our favorite games from the internet, but the only way we can play them for now is on the weekends and through the Flash player. No matter, we have a repository, except at the time, I didn't really know what else to do with it. Honestly, I have my older brother to thank for a lot of this, since he was really into computers and the internet, because the next find was really important. Freewebs.com, the free website hosting site. There's only so much a 10-year-old can do with this, but I spent hours designing and playing with the website. I'd substitute game time with free website designing. It wasn't necessarily a video game, so my parents didn't mind me on it, and I found out that it wasn't a block website at school, so I'd just keep building websites in my free time. Once the website was finished, I'd build another, continuously improving and upgrading and designing with new combinations. It went on like that for about a week, and I'd have 5 free websites built in that time. And then I found out that you could upload Flash components on a page. Now imagine, you're 10 years old and you just found out that Pandora's box is standing right in front of you and you can do whatever you want to with it. What do? Keep it to yourself? Tell an adult about this newly discovered volatile power? Hide it and make sure nobody else can use it for evil? Close, but not quite. I embedded a healthy variety of Flash games on that page, from the really meaty ones like Drag Racer V3 and the Murloc RPG to some miscellaneous light ones. This was a trial run, after all. I just needed to know if it worked, and if it did, how far I could push it. I did my work and went to sleep a little early that night, because curiosity got the better of me more than staying up past my bedtime did. That next day, I walked into the computer lab right when it opened up, the only one to walk in, and went straight for the website to the page where I embedded the games. I remember being so anxious about whether or not it would work, and the uncertainty was nagging to me ever since the car ride to school. I just needed to know, would I be able to play those games? To put it simply, there wouldn't be a story if they didn't work. The games worked! Not all of them did, but they worked! Drag Racer V3 had a save function, so all I could really do was play arcade mode, which was fine with me, but just about everything else worked as I expected them to. The problem I did find was space on the website filled up quite quickly, and I told myself that night I would embed more games on the other sites I built. I'd focus only on games that I could play casually, not lengthy ones like Murloc, because if I couldn't save, then there was, really no point in playing them. By the time I left the computer lab that morning, there were 3 other kids. This trend would continue no matter when I went. I went home that night, fixing everything that I could. When I reached my perceived limit, about 20 small games on the main site, I would load more games to another site. Eventually, I would move to fixing each website so they were separated by categories like action, shooter, racing, and so on. But as far as I was concerned, it was a problem for future me. I'd go to sleep early again, be the first and only one in the computer lab, and be one of only a handful of kids that would stay there. That would go on for several weeks. One day, the computer lab was busier than usual, which was fine because that was 10 kids and I was guaranteed a computer I could sit down and play at. A group of maybe 3 of those kids saw me playing on my websites and, without asking for a link, just looking at the URL on my browser, they started playing. For now, it was just me and those 3 kids, and I really didn't think much of it. I went home that day just thinking about playing another game and switching up the website so I could navigate it easier. I went to sleep and got to the computer lab the next day, the first one there. A little while later, more kids started walking in. Day by day, there were more kids coming in. By the end of the week, it was half full. A week after that, no more than 10 computers were left vacant. Eventually, on the guest book, because FreeWebs had that to allow you to post comments on the site, I had commenters, everything from fans of the website saying hi to kids who wanted to play a certain game from a certain site. It became a thing where I would read the requests during the day, make note of what games I could actually add on what website, and then download them and replace them later that night. Months later, the websites I built packed that whole computer lab. I even remember a day when I walked in late and there were kids watching each other play when they couldn't get a computer themselves. I couldn't even find one to get on, but adolescent me felt a strange sense of accomplishment and pride, seeing so many people recognize the work that it took to build something that they could all enjoy. Unfortunately, over spring break, the school district also recognized my work and rewarded me with a firewall notification the Monday I returned. I was upset, but I'm looking back on it, and I realized that I followed the rules so well that it caught the adults' attention. It was interesting because I wouldn't talk to anyone outside of me playing my games on the computer, but I felt like the mastermind, sitting in plain sight, who was the reason everyone was here. I don't think anyone connected the dots that I was the reason the computer lab was probably packed. It's probably not a great malicious compliance, but it is a story that I think about from time to time. Psycho Karen demands my house and sues me. Jail time for her with updates. Click the video on your screen. You don't want to miss this insane story, and I'll see you there.